Hello everyone, Cliff here. Welcome to another Corbett Corner, and today we're going to be taking another look at Cracked. You know, that hilarious helmet history guy that we went after last time? Sadly, my brother can't be here for this one, but hey, that's okay, because we're talking about a subject that I hold very dear to my heart. The samurai. Now, see, I want to preface this before we get started. I love Asian culture. I took several Asian history, culture, and language courses in college, and I eventually got a minor in Asian studies. I've dated two girls from Asia, one from Korea and the other from Japan, and I've studied various Asian martial arts. Now, with all that said, I am not an expert. I know a lot of things. I have a lot of facts stored away in my noggin, but I am by no means an expert. Do we have that clear? I don't want you attacking me saying, "What do you know? You're not Japanese. You're not a real historian like your brother. He's so much smarter than you are. You waste of space." Now, guys, don't call me that. I'm not a waste of space, because I make a waste of space look like an attractive alternative. But the reason I open up with that preface is because I know I'm not an expert. But here comes this self-defeating white guy, ready to school all of us on how he knows Japanese and samurai history and culture. For what, again? Why? You hear that sound? That's the sound of your hopes and dreams dying slowly. And painfully. Let's just do this.
Welcome to Hilarious Helmet History, the show where your cultural historical misconceptions are even sillier than my helmet. And this week I'm wearing a samurai helmet, because we're talking about samurai, medieval, fanatical, borderline magical Japanese swordsmen. Men who taught the world, and by the world I mean Tom Cruise, taught the world the meaning of honor. And everything I just said is ridiculous. You can let that go.
I will. Thank you.
Samurai were real Japanese warriors. Some were even what you're picturing.
Well, then in that case, show over. Your whole case here is to tell us how samurai are nothing like what we imagine, and now you're admitting some were. Not making a good case for yourself with that, are you? Isn't that like a lawyer defending his client by saying, "Now my client didn't kill 50 people. Just 10 people. Hey, still, not at all worth life in prison."
But samurai were also pirates, aristocrats, bureaucrats, women, British guys, African guys, and so many more people outside the frame of your samurai mental picture. Anyway, Japan had samurai from the 700 CE to the 1800 CE. That's over 1,000 years. Across that millennium of history and all its social and technological changes, samurai became several totally different things. For one thing, the word samurai roughly translates to one who serves the nobility. Early on, that meant a lot of things. Samurai didn't definitely mean soldier till the early 900s, and those samurai were mercenaries in the private armies of nobles ruled by Japan's emperor.
Okay, so, to be fair, he's not entirely wrong here, just not very specific. For those of you who genuinely want to know what the samurai really were like, I'll give you a very brief explanation. The original term for the warriors of Japan was the bushi, meaning warrior. This is what they were often referred to as. The term samurai dates back to the Nara period. If we go back to the Nara period of Japan, the newly implemented Taiho Code of 702 AD made it so that the population was required to report regularly for the census, which was a precursor for the national conscription. Emperor Monmu introduced a law whereby 1 in 3 to 4 adult males were drafted into the national military. This was one of the first attempts by the imperial government to form an organized army modeled after the Chinese system, because, you know, what you may not know is that Japan was trying to model itself off of China at the time. Now, Taiho Code classified most of the imperial bureaucrats into 12 ranks, each divided into 2 sub-ranks. The first rank was the highest advisor to the emperor. Now, what we're concerned about is those of the 6th rank and below, who are referred to as samurai and dealt with the day-to-day affairs. Although these samurai were civilian public servants, the military men, however, would not be referred to as samurai for many more centuries. Now, the big change in terms of the samurai came in the Heian period during the 8th and 9th centuries. See, Japan was divided up into regional clans and families with their own set of soldiers and warriors. The Emperor Kanmu wanted to consolidate his power in the northern lands of Honshu, but needed a strong military to wage war. Thus, he implemented the title of a shogun, a military leader who would rally the clans into an imperial fighting force to do what the emperor wished. The title was temporary, though, and would not have any political power until the 13th century. The drawback of Kanmu's idea to rally clans clans into a solid fighting force was that farmers, peasants, and clans began consolidating their own power and growing in strength, and soon they became the powerful family clans we know about today. Some clans formed as a result of political marriages and agreements, and others formed from farmers who banded together, taking up arms and armor to protect themselves from oppressive clans, and thus began the feudal nature of Japan. But that's just bare minimum information that I'm giving you. There's so much more to learn, so much more context. I urge you to do your own research.
By the late 1100s, samurai became more like European knights, low-ranking nobles, sworn to serve high-ranking nobles, who served Japan's shogun, a military ruler who technically reported to the emperor, but not really.
Sorry, again, I gotta get into the historical aspect here, because it's, again, very bare minimum, but I do want to say this. This is referring to the beginning of the shogunate. See, as these regional clans that I talked about earlier began to grow in power, they realized that they didn't have to answer to the emperor anymore, because, they have the soldiers. Eventually, the three most powerful clans of the time, the Fujiwara, the Minamoto, and the Taira, began to consolidate their power and grow until, eventually, the Minamoto and Taira clans clashed in what became known as the Heiji Rebellion in 1160. When the Taira were victorious, their leader became the first shogunate by overthrowing the central government and making the emperor more of a figurehead. However, in the later Genpei War in 1180 to 1185, the Minamoto overthrew the Taira and began the Kamakura period of Japanese history, because the Minamoto set up their capital in Kamakura. Slowly but surely, through the Minamoto taking advantage of shogun privileges and taxation, the samurai became the political ruling class in Japan. And again, I need to be fair. He hasn't said anything really wrong. I just really wish he'd get more specific. But for what it is and for what I was expecting, not a bad start. So let's keep going. Let's see what else he has to say.
Along the way, some unemployed samurai became pirates, called wuku, raiding the Asian mainland.
Wait, whoa, what? Woku? No, unemployed samurai were called ronin. The woku is a term meaning dwarf pirate. It's a pejorative term given to a group of Asian pirates who were a mix of Japanese, Korean, and Chinese. Plus, the fact that you think woku were samurai clearly shows you don't actually understand the difference between a samurai and someone who just picks up a sword. Newsflash, just because a Japanese man picks up a sword and calls himself a warrior doesn't mean he's a samurai. And now on to what the woku were. Who were they? Well, the current prevailing theory is that of Shōsuke Murai, who demonstrated in his book Chūsei wajinden in 1988 that the early woku came from multiple ethnic groups rather than one singular nation. Murai wrote that the woku were marginal men living in politically unstable areas without national allegiances. Or another theory presented by Professor Takeo Tanaka of the University of Tokyo proposes that the early woku were Koreans living on an outlying island. Do you want to know which theory states they were unemployed samurai? None! You receive no points!
You lose!
Shogun rule fell apart in the mid-1400s, Japan fell into civil war, samurai fought those civil wars in exchange for more and more political power, and by the 1600s, when the dust settled, samurai had become Japan's ruling families, male and female aristocrats of the samurai class, whether or not they were soldiers. And samurai stayed that way, while also sometimes being soldiers, just for funsies, until Japan's feudal system ended in the 1870s.
That civil war you're speaking of is known as the Sengoku Jidai, or Warring States period, where the clans and feudal lords of Japan warred against each other over who would reach Kyoto and become shogun. In the end, it was Oda Nobunaga who came the furthest, but then was betrayed by one of his vassals, thus paving the way for Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and then finally Tokugawa Ieyasu to become the ruling shogun. This began the Edo, or Tokugawa era, and is what we commonly think of when we think of Japan's feudal system and feudal age. And he's right. At this time, the samurai were the ruling class of Japan under the Tokugawa family.
So that one term, samurai, that we associate with kinda sorta knights, actually describes over 1,000 years of knights, soldiers, mercenaries, nobles, pirates, and lady nobles. And if you believe our standard cultural conception of samurai, you believe every samurai on that 1,000-year timeline followed one rigorous military moral code called Bushido. It's sort of like European chivalry if you want to be sloppy about it, but those thousands of years of samurai were very different from each other.
Sorry for constantly stopping this thing, but I want to start off with this. He brought up Bushido. My Japanese history professor put it very bluntly like this. Pardon my French, but Bushido is bullshit. The word means warrior way, or way of the warrior. The way he explained it to me is that while the samurai did have a code of ethics and a warrior way, the modern idea of Bushido that we have is mostly fabricated and built off of Western ideals, where we overly romanticize the way of Japanese warriors. However, the samurai did have a code of ethics and honor, and we'll get to that in a minute. But first, I need to preface that because what this guy's about to do is he's going to paint a picture that tells you the samurai did not have a code of honor, and the idea that they have one flies in the face of reality. I need to preface this. They did have a code of honor, and while we in the West may have over-romanticized it to some extent, it doesn't change reality. There was a code of honor to the samurai, but let's see what he has to say.
And the samurai soldiers weren't all chivalrous and white knighty all the time. Samurai retreated from battle, betrayed each other, robbed and killed poorer people, and did other things that are characteristic of, let's see, it says here, humans. Actual humans, not made-up guys in poems or whatever.
Yes, samurai were human. They cheated each other, they betrayed each other, they retreated from battle. They did a lot of things that were underhanded and cold. Yep. Definitely the way of humans. What's your point? Who says they didn't? Yes, while there were plenty of samurai who fled from battle or betrayed their vassals, much like Akechi Mitsuhide, who betrayed Oda Nobunaga and led to his downfall, there were some who actually didn't. A good example, Tori Mototada. In the final days of the Sengoku Jidai, Tokugawa Ieyasu knew his enemies were coming to claim him, and he warned Mototada that his castle was in their path. Mototada and Tokugawa were close friends, but Mototada simply said he would not flee. His men held their garrison for 10 days. Their sacrifice helped delay Uesugi Kagekatsu, the invading daimyo, and led to Tokugawa's eventual victory against his enemy Ishida Mitsunari. Sorry for all the Japanese names, it's a lot to remember. Also, allow me to read you a direct quote that was said by Mototada when he met with Tokugawa. He said this: "It is not the way of the warrior to be shamed and avoid death, even under circumstances that are not particularly important. It goes without saying that to sacrifice one's life for the sake of his master is an unchanging principle. That I should be able to go ahead of all the other warriors of this country and lay down my life for the sake of my master's benevolence is an honor to my family and has been my most fervent desire for many years." So, yeah, still human though, still human. Oh, how about this one? How about this quote from Japanese historian Daisetsu Taitsuro Suzuki describing the Uesugi belief? Here was one of his beliefs, according to this historian. "Those who are reluctant to give up their lives and embrace death are not true warriors. Go to the battlefield firmly confident of victory, and you will come home with no wounds whatever. Engage in combat fully determined to die, and you will be alive. Wish to survive in the battle, and you will surely meet death. When you leave the house determined not to see it again, you will come home safely. When you have any thought of returning, you will not return. You may not be in the wrong to think that the world is always subject to change, but the warrior must not entertain this way of thinking, for his fate is always determined." So, yes, you are right. There are plenty of examples of samurai being dishonorable, fleeing from battle, and being underhanded. But there are also plenty of examples of a code of honor and ethics and honorable fighting amongst samurai. See, diversity of lifestyles and living? Wow, maybe it's because they were, human.
That's also why documented cases of samurai committing ritual suicide, also known as seppuku, are rare. Once in a while, Japanese generals and leaders were forced to kill themselves ritually. However, being forced to kill yourself is more of an execution.
Rare? Did you say it was rare? Okay, hold on one second. Let's see, Okay, what I'm showing you are a list of notable cases of seppuku just from a simple Wikipedia search. And these are just notable. There are likely far more than this. In fact, the same Wikipedia page goes into great detail the ritual itself, and how it was used strategically as a form of regaining honor, and how women would perform it too if their husbands did it. I'm sorry, but something so well understood, documented, and prepared isn't something rarely done. In fact, some of these that are listed are making note of multiple people documented in the same event. Like this one right here. But the real issue here is just how blatantly Western your view is. Not only do you not understand the nature of seppuku, you don't understand its view in the eyes of the samurai. You see it as a form of execution, a forced death. However, some chose it. Some wanted to die in this manner. Life is precious to us, but to some of the samurai, honor was more important. In fact, in this clip from The Last Samurai, the same movie you're going to attack later, they point out this reality.
And what do you want?
To know my enemy.
I've seen what you do to your enemies.
The warriors in your country do not kill?
They don't cut the heads off defeated kneeling men.
General Hasegawa asked me to help him end his life. A samurai cannot stand the shame of defeat. I was honored to cut off his head. Many of our customs seem strange to you, and the same is true of yours. For example, not to introduce yourself is considered extremely rude even among enemies.
Nathan Ogren.
I'm honored to meet you. I have enjoyed this conversation in English.
I have questions.
You don't come from this culture. You can't understand what seppuku meant to them. Stop trying to speak for people you know nothing about.
Meanwhile, regular defeated samurai tended to surrender, be prisoners, quit the military, beg, some form of not bleeding out on purpose. Because again, humans. Still says humans.
You really are an arrogant little xenophobe. Yes, they are humans. Did you know that some humans actually commit suicide by choice? What? But they're humans. Shouldn't they value life over everything else? Wouldn't they beg, plead, and surrender first? Well, no, that's just what some would do. That's what you would do. But because we're human and are capable of thinking, feeling, and acting according to our own standards and ideals, some of us might choose to commit suicide while others don't. Just because you see something as barbaric and insane doesn't mean that it is to them. This is the case with the samurai, and this is the case with modern day humans. The fact that you think that all humans think and feel the same way is kind of sad.
So, where did we get that concept of samurai being fanatical super soldiers? Well, the biggest influence on modern samurai lore is a writer named Inazo Nitobe. He was born in the ancient medieval year of 1862. Wow, he was younger than Teddy Roosevelt. Anyway, Nitobe became a respected scholar of not history. He studied English literature. He also left Japan, moved to California, and wrote and published his English language book, Bushido, the Soul of Japan, in 1899. In history, samurai fought like soldiers. In Nitobe's book, they fought like higher beings. In history, Japan's government cracked down on a Catholic rebellion by suppressing Christianity throughout their country starting in the 1600s. In Nitobe's book, Japanese samurai and Christian European knights had matching values, right down to the medieval Christian belief that anatomically, the human soul is located in the gut region, and therefore seppuku requires a stab to the tum-tum to get the soul, some guy says. Because in history, people use sources. In Nitobe's book, sources would have slowed down sales. He wanted to write a bestseller, and he did it.
I could end the video right here. This one piece from his video actually shoots himself so hard in the foot, I don't think he even has a leg to stand on. Let's start with his first point, that Nitobe does not have the authority to speak on Japanese samurai because he was born in 1862, and that he moved to California, and that he was a student of English. Okay, why can't he write what he wants? He's got more credit than you do. He was born in 1862. He was just a child when the samurai class was overthrown in the Meiji Restoration. As a child, seeing the samurai as a boy and watching the change in his country probably influenced his view of the samurai and thus allowed him to write about them from a totally unique perspective. Entirely accurate? Maybe not, but far more than some cracked idiot who I doubt has a historical degree. I do love that, though. He wasn't a scholar of history, he was a scholar of English. What's your scholarly degree? Are you a historian? I'd really like to see that. Your second point to all this is my favorite. Historians use sources, but sources would have gotten in the way of money. Okay, let's take a look down here at your video and see your sources, because I'm sure as you are a cracked journalist, I'm sure you have oh, wait. No, there's nothing here. There are no sources. I guess sources got in the way of your narrative, didn't it? Don't throw rocks in glass houses, you idiot. And I really do hate this guy for not only his hypocrisy, but also for applying motive to Nitobe. You claim that he wanted to write a bestseller. Maybe he wanted to write something he loved. Maybe he wanted to help show Western audiences how much he loved the samurai. But see, I wouldn't know. After all, I'm not him. I'm not Japanese. I wasn't born in 1862. And Crack didn't use any actual sources to prove anything. Screw you.
Nitobe's Bushido book was so successful, President Theodore Roosevelt bought 60 copies of it for his friends and family. And Nitobe's success meant the Western world's knowledge of Japanese culture took its cues from one guy in California. No, I didn't mean that guy. Although I kind of mean that guy.
As opposed to you, some gay guy in a samurai helmet, probably from California.
Hi there, Kettle. Name's Pot. Have we met?
American pop culture says samurai were Japanese King Arthurs, men from out of time in touch with ancient bravery that let them bring a sword to a gunfight and die a lot.
Okay, so let's get this started. That clip you're showing and what The Last Samurai was about was the Satsuma Rebellion. You see, when the Meiji Restoration was getting started, the whole movement for the Meiji Restoration was to modernize Japan, to return power to the emperor, and to make it an imperial country again. And the samurai were very worried that in doing this, it would take away their rights and privileges that they held on to under the Tokugawa shogunate. So there was a huge rebellion by the samurai called the Satsuma Rebellion, and it ended with the Battle of Shiroyama, led by Saigo Takamori. And that's what The Last Samurai was mostly about. It's what it was centered around. That was the big deal. And after that battle, that was when the age of the samurai truly ended, and we were allowed to have Imperial Japan return. And one of the misconceptions about Shiroyama and about the Satsuma Rebellion is that the samurai only used swords. They didn't use guns because that was untraditional. Not true at all. One of the first things that Saigo and the samurai raided was an armory warehouse where they could get guns, military uniforms, and cannons. So no, they totally used guns and cannons. That is 100% true. But what was also true is Saigo went into it knowing they were probably going to lose. But it was the principle of the thing. It was the idea of they weren't going to go down without a fight. They were going to stand up for their ideals and their beliefs. So I wanted to preface that right away. But it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, the Battle of Shiroyama gave us one of the most badass songs of all time. Hit it! Till the dawn they hold on. Only 40 are left at the end. Not alive, not survive. Shiroyama!
Even though in real life, samurai relied on pole weapons and bows whenever possible, because close sword combat is way more dangerous. Also, Japanese militaries had guns as early as the 1500s. They also had cannons. Yeah, samurai used cannons to defend their fortifications as early in history as the Europeans did, because they liked to win battles. Because, do I have to keep doing the note thing? It says humans on it, you know. You get it, okay.
You know, I honestly wish you'd stop doing the note thing, because you don't know what you're talking about. Yes, the samurai did have guns and cannons. They had hand cannons. Now Oda Nobunaga was actually very famous for his use of arquebuses in battle. In 1543, the Portuguese brought large quantities of firearms to Japan and mass production began up until Sakoku, or close country policy, came into place. And with Sakoku in place, the development of guns grinded to a halt as Japan attempted to do away with outside influence in traditional culture, including the use of firearms. This wouldn't change until 1854 with the end of Sakoku and the return of Western influence. But here's the thing you don't seem to get. You didn't understand this with 300, and you don't understand it with The Last Samurai. Hollywood loves fiction. They love over-dramatizing things. Real historians know better, and most of your audience knows better. We're not all idiots. And again, yes, the samurai liked to win battles, and that was sometimes done with a sword and sometimes done with a gun. But tell me this, you moron. If the swords were so obsolete in the face of these advanced firearms, why keep swords at all? Why bother? Maybe because of traditional values, overstepping the new advances in technology. Maybe because the firearms they had were not that advanced and sometimes were not useful at certain distances. Maybe because the cannons they used were very unreliable at times. Now you just keep pulling out your note card like it can protect you from real arguments.
Anyway, I don't want to bag on The Last Samurai too hard. It's got a white savior thing going on, and that ain't great.
He didn't really save anything. If anything, the Japanese culture saved him. Who did he save again? It's not like he really stopped anything.
But at least the movie saviors around while introducing people to the Meiji Restoration, a real era of Japanese history that they depict with kinda sorta accuracy, sorta. And while Tom Cruise's character is the actor Tom Cruise, pretty much, there was a real phenomenon of immigrants to Japan becoming important samurai. English sailor William Adams and Dutch sailor Jan Joosten came to Japan, redesigned Japan's navy, and worked their way up to being personal samurai of the shogun. Similar advancement happened for many Koreans, for many French soldiers, and for one African man known to history as Yasuke, who followed missionaries to Japan, stuck around, became a samurai in 1582, and became the personal bodyguard of Oda Nobunaga, one of the founders of what became modern unified Japan.
Okay, so that's a little bit disingenuous. He wasn't a bodyguard. Any samurai that served under Oda Nobunaga was technically his bodyguard because any enemy had to get through that samurai to get to him. Actually, Yasuke was more of a sword carrier. You see, Oda Nobunaga enjoyed talking to him and found him intriguing because of his black skin. They hit it off, they had a really good relationship, and he made him a sword carrier, which, granted, is a very high position. But he only served in, I think, 2 battles that are recorded. He was there to help try to defend Oda Nobunaga when Akechi Mitsuhide betrayed him, but he was turned over to the Akechi forces after Oda Nobunaga died, and he was referred to as an animal, and was, rather than killed, was delivered to Portuguese missionaries and merchants. After that, he disappears from the history books. So, yeah, kind of a dark ending to that story.
That real story of an important black samurai is way more interesting than Hollywood's fictional tale where samurai culture teaches a drunk white guy how to detox. And if we get over our collective confusion about what samurai were, we could understand the world better and get awesomer movies made.
And there we have it. You heard it here, folks. That's the motive. You want a movie about a black samurai. Actually, if you really want that, there's an entire anime called Afro Samurai starring Samuel L. Jackson.
Drink that, boy.
Another one? On his tab?
But ignoring that, here's what I love. You just complained about how awful it is for a movie to have a white savior save Japan. But I guess it's okay if it's a black savior. Oh, and the best part, you're against misrepresenting Japanese culture, but felt it would be cool to have The Black Samurai as your next big movie suggestion, even though you know very little about Yasuke, and Yasuke's story is incredibly short, incredibly dark, and while maybe good for movie fodder, there are so many more things about the Sengoku Jidai that would make for awesome movies. I could see so many TV shows and movies made about the Sengoku Jidai that would blow minds, and your only bit after all this is just to point out this one itty-bitty bit about Yasuke and say, that's what we should build a movie off of. I'll be real honest, and I don't want to sound crude or rude or anything here. I'll be real honest. I think the story of The Last Samurai is actually more interesting than the very brief story of Yasuke.
Because sure, there are excellent samurai movies. Films like Kurosawa's Seven Samurai combine a fictional story with rigorous historical research. But if we don't hook Hollywood with a new, real samurai story, and soon, our most recent cinematic samurai will be this angry Japan bot, surrounded by explosions and hot teens, while other angry robots fight angry robot dinosaurs. But in a bad way, though. Okay, robot, dinosaur, explosion, babe, etc. I mean that, but in a bad way. Also, how did Hollywood make that premise hard to watch? I'd buy a ticket to that thought.
The same way you made this video hard to watch. By delivering something meant only for viewership and indoctrination, rather than being actually heartfelt or done through research or intrigue or care. By lying to your audience about what makes good cinema, history, and culture, for the sake of stroking a long, tired narrative. By treating your audience like children and questioning their intelligence and understanding of the real world and the way it works. Yeah, so, in reality, you are guilty of the same sins as Michael Bay. But here's the difference. With Michael Bay, he could at least engage children. You put them to sleep. And I think that's the ultimate sin of what you do on Cracked. In history, there are things that we simply don't know or misunderstand. We have misconceptions about history. Good channels like Extra Credit History do a great job of portraying our misconceptions and explaining true history to us through good videos, cute cartoons and animations, and giving full context to the people and places that we need to learn more about. This is good history. This is good teaching. But what you do is you don't teach. You apply narrative to everything and everyone that you talk about. You look at the 300 Spartans and you say, well, they owned slaves, and they were crazy for forcing all their men to join their army. They were insane for doing that, whereas the Persians were building more Western style of government, and how they influenced Alexander the Great, even though you don't back this up with sources and you don't back it up with proof. You just simply apply your narrative to state it. And then in this video, you say, well, samurai didn't actually fight with honor. I mean, they wanted to win battles. I mean, after all, they were only human. And samurai didn't choose to commit suicide. That's ridiculous. Life is precious. Why would they do that? Why would they voluntarily bleed out on purpose? That just doesn't make any sense. See, you're applying this narrative, you're applying these motives to historical figures without proof, without evidence, and clearly to sell an agenda. How do I know this? Because the only aspects you praise are the things you want to see pushed, like a Black Samurai movie. After spending the entire video talking about how the samurai were nothing like what we thought, you suddenly want a Black Samurai. Tell me, is the Black Samurai going to have all of the same traits about the samurai you just deemed as stupid, like the seppuku thing? Or the honor thing? Is your Black Samurai going to be a cheating, lying, and stealing samurai? Because you just said that samurai did that because they were human. Or is your Black Samurai going to be honorable, sword-wielding? But wait, that's not human. You spent the entire video telling us how that's wrong. See, that's the problem. You tell us what you want to hear. And that's not history. Guys, like I said before, Japanese culture and history is very fascinating. In fact, Asian culture and history is fascinating all around. I'm not an expert. I said this before. I told him that he wasn't talking about things that he understood. And I don't fully understand it all either. I'm learning every day. I'm constantly doing more research and learning so much more all the time. And I highly encourage you, don't take my word for it. Don't take his word for it. I urge you to do your own research, look into the facts yourself, formulate your own opinions, because that's how you learn history. Not by presenting personal biases, not by presenting personal narratives and applying them to historical figures. By actually looking at the facts, looking at historical documentation, going to classes, and learning for yourself. Because that is the way you learn history. And that's how I've been learning for a long time. So, that's all I have to say for this. Next video, my brother is going to be tackling this guy solo, because he's got a bone to pick with him too. And then after that, I think we'll be done with Cracked, unless he just releases something monumentally stupid. But anyway, I should preface, we don't hate this guy. Like I said before, he's free to talk about what he wants. He's free to present his own personal biases, but it infuriates us when people treat history like this, in this irreverent way. We'll see you next time.